historical accounts of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus called the Gospels. And if somebody wants to reject those Gospels as being good historical accounts, then they got to prove it. They can't just say, well, I don't accept miracles and therefore I'm not going to accept these. But we let them get away with that. They have to show us why that presupposition to remove the miraculous from the world makes sense. So don't give yourself the burden of proof here. You have 4 independent accounts about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. Certainly Paul talks about it as well. So these are independent accounts. Because they're in one book and they talk about miracles means nothing. Okay? So, in fact, the accounts are so compelling that most biblical historians remove the miracles from the equation, but still accept what is said about the historical person of Jesus. Some people have even gone so far as to try to reconcile the fact that we have so many eyewitnesses of Jesus after his death that they come up with some interesting theories. And I'm sure you've seen these. You've got the swoon theory. Jesus just passed out. He went through a Roman scourging and hung on the cross and passed out. Now they'll look at the fact that Jesus died so quickly, and Pontius Pilate was surprised by that. So clearly he just passed out. The drug theory. Jesus was a stoner. He just had drugs, knocked him out. People thought he was dead, so he didn't really die. The twin theory, one of my personal favorites, that either Jesus had a twin that they mistakenly crucified. Usually Simon of Cyrene is the dude that they have to back that up with. Or Jesus actually died, but it was his twin that came, and showed himself to the several thousand people, and they didn't know the difference. And usually they look at Thomas as being the possibility for that, because it does say in the Bible that Thomas is called the twin, right? So we don't really know what to do with that. So maybe there's some credence for there. Of course, I'm not sure how Thomas would have been able to put his own finger in his wound. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So the hypnosis theory is just big old post-hypnotic suggestion. Also, the reason they explain that Jesus was able to cure people through hypnosis, so he was one heck of a hypnotist, apparently. He was able to make people see and walk again. And then there's the spiritual resurrection theory, which we kind of talked about last week with the whole concept of teleportation. The Bible does say that Jesus was able to go through walls, he was able to appear, he was able to change his appearance to people. So this is really, the Gnostics like this one, that it wasn't an actual physical resurrection of Jesus, it was a spiritual resurrection of Jesus. Oh, by the way, I should mention in the vision theory that they use Acts 9:3-9, and Paul on the road to Damascus, he saw this big light and he heard Jesus' voice, and so that was a group hallucination. Paul wasn't a believer, so at that point he was killing the Christians, so I'm not sure why he would go through a hallucination, but that's another possibility as well. So what do we have? Index to history. We got the thumb left, and this is a big one. This is one that we can all understand. The Bible changes people's lives, doesn't it? We are walking testimonies to this fact. We were dark, depraved, rebellious individuals, and then Jesus touched our heart and we completely changed. In fact, this is for you, Eric. You know who this guy is? This is David Berkowitz, also known as the Son of Sam. 1967, he was convicted to 367 years, I believe. I could be off by a decade or two, but I don't think he's going to really mind. For murdering. He was a serial killer. Now in 1987, Berkowitz came to Christ. And he has continued the fruit of his conversion in prison to change the lives of people in their situation. In fact, in 2002, when Berkowitz came up for parole, he wrote this letter to Governor Pataki. And he said, quote, "In all honesty, I believe that I deserve to be in prison for the rest of my life. I have, with God's help, long ago come to terms with my situation, and I have accepted my punishment." Now, that's a little different than what Berkowitz said in 1967 when he was actually was being convicted, when he chanted, I'm not going to say it because there's kids in the room, that, over and over again. And he was specifically talking about Stacy Malkowitz, who was one of his, I think it's Malkowitz, last victims. The Bible changes people's lives. And though this may be an extreme situation, and his situation hasn't changed, he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, and it's exactly where he belongs. But what he's doing with his situation shows the hand of God at work. Can any of us say that we are the same people today that we were before we came to Christ? And if we can, we need to seriously look at our situation, don't we? How come I get less people every time? Come on. You guys are like on different fingers. So I said there were 6, right? So what's the last one? Fist. The Bible's a fighter. This book has been criticized for thousands of years. And yet, for some reason, it continues to stand the test of time. Now, everybody knows that the Bible is the best-selling book of all time. I think they sell like 5,000 an hour. But did you also know it's the most shoplifted item in the world? It's kind of an interesting thing. It's kind of a contradiction, but this book continues to stand the test of time. What is it about this book that makes the other books different? Why is it that people want it so bad? How is it that it can continue to withstand criticism? In fact, here are just some of the quotes. I'll call them predictions that were made over the past couple hundred years by different people. I'm going to start with John Lennon in 1966. For those of you that were alive, I was not. This quote got him in trouble. You probably know it. "Christianity will go. It will vanish and shrink. I needn't argue about that. I am right and will be proved right. We're more popular than Jesus now." That's the part people didn't like. "I don't know which will go first, rock and roll or Christianity. Jesus is all right, but his disciples were thinking ordinary. It's them twisting it that ruins it for me." John Lennon, 1966. Now, we don't know if Lennon's prediction is going to come true or not. Rock and roll is still around, but the one thing we do know is that it's outlasted John Lennon. And so hopefully, John Lennon's not paying the price for that quote. Now here's another one. In 100 years, the Bible will be a forgotten book found only in museums. That was said by Voltaire 100 years after Voltaire's death. The house in which he actually uttered that quote was taken over by the Geneva Bible Society for the sole purpose of printing Bibles. Now, I like the last one. Honestly, I just think it's funny. So that's why I put it in there. The governor of Texas, who when asked if the Bible should also be taught in Spanish, replied that, quote, "If English was good enough for Jesus, then it's good enough for me." And Christopher Hitchens, who is a very well-known atheist, hostile towards Christianity, is the one that uttered that quote in a debate. Now, it should be mentioned that Christopher Hitchens hasn't even been able to convince his family of his own views. His brother, it's almost creepy when you hear him talk, his brother Peter Hitchens is actually a member of good standing in the Church of England. He is a writer and a debater, and he is a Christian. And they sound exactly the same. So the funny thing is, when I hear the two of them talking, I sometimes hope that I'm seeing into the future, that at some point Christopher Hitchens will utter the same words that his brother utters now, when the Bible can touch his heart, when Jesus can touch his heart. So what do we have?